All right, let's continue with the texturing of the character here in Substance 3D Painter. The suit is almost ready, but I wanted to add a few more details that I think adds a little extra depth to the, let's say, to the layers that are already visible parts of this suit. So I found this really cool cable material that you can get from the Substance 3D asset library, and I find it really interesting to create this sort of padded pattern in certain areas of the suit. So for instance, in the section around the shoulders that look great as a connection between the chest piece and the shoulder pads, for example. Just I imagine the character, lifting the arms and feeling that sort of like really strong, sharp edge, in the shoulder. So this kind of like gives it a little bit of a padding. So that's kind of like the design choice or the design thinking behind these additional details. You could also make a nice protective layer around the gloves, for example, and on the hands. Maybe around the arms as well, and the biceps and things like that. So, just go through the process of adding as many details or as many, let's say, layers or materials that you need to convey what you want to create with your piece. But once you're happy with this suit, in this case, we can move on to the armor pieces, which is also a lot of fun. So I've created many of my own materials over time, which, really speeds up the workflow. Sometimes I make things from scratch, right? Like layer by layer, but whenever I end up with a material that I like or a series of layers that are working really well, I put them together into a folder and I save them as a smart material. So that way I can use it in future projects just like this one. So I'm going to drag and drop this custom green smart material onto the chest piece just to start with something. And this will be the main sort of metal coating or kind of like the paint or the surface finish, if you will, for the armor. And then I'm going to find another one and I'm going to add this simple custom metal material as well on top. And I'm going to use this one with a black mask to reveal some of the edge wear and the wear and tear in general and the scratches. You can, of course, build a mask from scratch as well, but Painter includes some really great presets that, in general, again, helps you to speed things up. So in the asset library, just go to the Smart Mask and type gun just to filter the list and find the gun edges. And that's it. We'll use that to start. Let's go ahead and drag and drop that into the mask of the entire metal folder. That's it. Pretty cool, right? A couple of smart materials and a smart mask, and we already halfway there. Of course, all of this is pretty much a preset that I've created for myself, so we can customize it further. For instance, I'm going to bring in a grunge map and place it on top of that first layer of the masking effect. And I'm going to set the blending mode to subtract, so that basically whatever I place or whatever grunge map I use in this case is going to remove or subtract from the overall mask that I'm creating. So from all these edges and all the scratches. And that helps to kind of like reduce the effect, the intensity of the effect a little bit and make it a little bit more believable in a way. I also have a rust material that I set up in my custom smart material. And I'm using a bunch of different masks and cavity rust mask and all of that to drive this effect, or at least the rust of this effect. But I don't want this to look like, an actual rust, right? So I want to use a really handy effect called the HSL Perceptive or Hue Saturation Lightness Perceptive filter. And that allows me to change the hue, the brightness, the saturation, that sort of thing. And I honestly think that this filter is one of the most underrated, but one of the most powerful and useful tools in Painter. I use it constantly to tweak hues and saturation, like I said, to any type of material. And it just makes it really easy and really simple to make it suit a specific design palette. And here is a really cool trick. We can reuse this entire material setup with all the tweaks and everything that we've done and the masking and all of that across multiple parts or multiple texture sets that we want them to share the same look or the same material. So I'm going to grab both of these folders, the metal cover or the coating and the metal folder, and I'm going to group them together into a single folder, and I'm going to call it Armor. So now that we have this folder, we can right-click on it and we can choose the Instantiate Across Texture Set. There's going to be a window that will pop up, and this allows you to instantiate this across any texture set. So I'm going to click None first just to kind of like clear the list because I don't want to apply it to everything. And then I'm going to tick only the sets that I want this material to be applied to. So for instance, the pads, the boots, the belt areas in some areas, and obviously the chest, right? And that's it. We can click OK, and Painter will automatically apply the same material setup to all the selected texture sets. What's even better is that all of those pieces are now sharing an instance of that material. So that means if you change the hue, the saturation, or any type of masking or anything in the original material that is being used in the chest plate, all the updates that you create are going to instantly be applied or are going to be shown in the other parts that are using the same material. Very, very handy stuff. So at this point, it's just more about refinement, adjusting all the materials just to complete the look. For example, I will add a fabric pattern to the strap, just something that feels kind of like a repetitive pattern. And since we have created straight UVs during the unwrapping process, these are really, really easy to texture consistently because it's just, you can have a pattern that is vertical or horizontal, and it will be applied to the entirety of the strap, even if it wraps around the leg or the arm. And you might be wondering why I didn't add too many fine details in the mesh in ZBrush. So I didn't use any alphas or any custom brushes to add high frequency details in ZBrush. And the reason is that I can create all of those high frequency surface details right inside Painter, and I can use normal maps and I can use hide information, all of that good stuff directly in Painter. So for example, if I want to add additional details like normal map details to the hard surface area, I like to work with a single painting layer. And I can use any of the hard surface normal details that are included with Painter. So you can find all of those in the textures that come with Painter. And you can drag and drop them into a hard brush, for example, and literally paint those details or paint that normal information directly into the armor or any other area that you want. It's a very simple and very fast way to add details, and it looks awesome. Plus, since it's purely texture-based, you don't need to create any extra geometry or any complex loops or topology for those small features so that you can represent any changes in the actual geometry. This is pure texture. Everything is done through the texture maps. And by the way, there are plenty of normal details to choose from, that come with Painter, but you can also create your own and you can add them to your library. Or in fact, there is a large collection of hard surface detail maps that are available for free in the resource section of the Pathblender Academy. So just go ahead and check it out, and you can filter by normal maps, and then you can import them into Painter and use them as well. Another thing that I love doing in Painter, especially for sci-fi design and this type of genre, is adding emissive details. I don't know why, it just looks cool and more sci-fi, I guess. So to do that, I'm going to create a fill layer, and I'm going to enable the emissive channel. And basically that creates a layer that is emissing, right? So we're going to create a black mask, and that hides that away. And then we can start painting that mask to freely add those glowing accents or light strips anywhere in the suit. And of course, you can always, refine the look further with adjustment layers, maybe more HSL perceptive filters. You can add grunge variation or, tweak specific details. But these are the main techniques that I use to texture the character. So as you can see, it might look complex, but, when you break it down and the steps, it's just very repetitive stuff. And obviously, the more time that you spend, the more patience that you have to add certain details and refine and fine-tune materials, the better it's going to, the better textures you're going to end up with. All right, so now the final step for this texturing process is to actually export the textures or the set of textures so that we can set them up in Character Creator 5, which is our main project file. Now, don't worry too much. This is a super straightforward process, but I'll show you exactly what to do so that you know the correct settings. The first thing that you need to do is download the CC5 export preset or the Character Creator preset so that you can export all the textures in the right format that CC5 actually expects so that it knows how to connect them automatically. You can find this in the Realution website, but I've also added the link in the video description just to make it easier. So go ahead and download that. Once the preset has been placed in the correct folder, all you need to do is go to File and then Export Textures. Now, in the export window, toggle off all the texture sets that you didn't modify. So in my case, things like the eyes or the eyebrows, those are things that I'm just going to use in CC5. So I don't need to export them here and generate a bunch of empty texture maps. So I'm going to tick them off, and that also keeps the export a little bit cleaner. Then under the global settings, choose the correct output template. This is where the template that you downloaded comes into play. So from the dropdown, find the one that's called Character Creator, and that's it. We can just go ahead and choose the you prefer format. I'm going to go for PNGs, and also I'm going to set the resolution to 4K. But again, you can go for 2K, or if you want to go crazy, you can export at 8K. I think 4K is more than enough, and we have plenty of detail. And select the folder for the output. And that's it. Let's go ahead and hit export. All right, so once this process is finished, you'll have a set of folders containing all the texture maps. Now we can head back to CC5 and start connecting everything. So once in Character Creator, let's go ahead and click on the File menu, then open up the Substance Painter pipeline menu. And in here we have the other button that we didn't use, which is the Update Textures from Substance Painter. So let's go ahead and click on that. And a pop-up browser will ask you to choose or to select the folder that you use to export all of the textures. Go ahead and select that and click OK. And CC5 will automatically import and assign every single map on every single material correctly so that you don't have to do anything else. So that's it. We have all the textures that we did in Painter imported into CC5. Now, if you're following along and you've done all the steps that I've done so far, and you import your textures and all of your extra assets appear as, as the ones that I have, like completely black, don't panic. That's not an error. In fact, everything is fine. It just means that we are blending the dark diffusion color that I added earlier on to visualize the deformations on top of the texture. So all we need to do is set the diffuse color back to white, to that default white color, and the full set of textures will display properly. Don't worry. Done. Everything looks great now. That's about it. So you see, all of these pipelines and all of these connections that CC5 has created makes it really easy to just bring back and forth different different things in the process or in the pipeline, like the meshes, the textures, even animations if you're using a different type of software. But the goal here is to create an awesome looking concept from a character from scratch, and we're going to render that in Marmoset. Now, before we move into that rendering part, there are just a couple more kind of like finishing touches that I like to do. I have a custom texture for the eyes with a black sclera, kind of like the white part of the eye. And this is just something different that I think it fits within the look of this character, the more alien look of the character. So I'm just going to replace that sclera textures with my own image. And that's it. It's kind of like the same thing. It just has a black color instead of the white one. And you can also select the eyes object. And from the texture panel, you can go to the modify tab. And in here, you can tweak a few settings like the iris brightness, or if you want to, you can scale the pupil and things like that. So very handy stuff, even after you have completed everything else. I just think that these little adjustments help you refine the final concept and the final look before you send it to render. Also, just a quick note if you want to play with some of the facial expressions here in CC5. The dynamic wrinkle feature in CC5 is phenomenal, but it uses its own dedicated textures and normal maps. That's just because that's the scan data and the normals that were generated for these specific expressions. So you might want to update those with your Painter-generated diffuse and your normal maps just to keep the consistency in those expressions. Otherwise, when you animate, you create like a surprise face, you might see that in certain areas, the texture is different from, in my case, the yellow texture, right? That's pretty much it. It's just something to keep in mind. All right, so that's a wrap for this video. We just need to pose the character and then send it for rendering. So in the next video, we're going to pose the character and I'm going to show you a really cool new integration that allows you to set everything up in Marmoset Toolbag 5 with a single click. I'll see you there.